In America, the people decided to end the revolutionary decade of the 60s by electing President Richard Nixon, an ultra-conservative Republican. Nixon did finally withdraw American soldiers from Vietnam in 1975, right before he became the only president in history to resign when he was facing criminal charges for placing secret surveillance devices inside the office of the rival government party. With the long conflict in Vietnam over, the eyes of the world shifted to yet another powerful government, the Soviet Union. The United States and the USSR were considered to be the only true superpowers in the world, and as the conflicts between the two countries started to escalate into what was called the Cold War, it seemed they were on the brink of a nuclear showdown. In the 1980s, America and the USSR elected new leaders, President Ronald Reagan and General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. Despite their countries' differences, the two of them actually met several times for peace talks, and it appeared that both leaders were willing to compromise. But in a speech at the Berlin Wall in communist-controlled East Germany, President Reagan made it clear that he wanted the USSR to demonstrate their desire for peace.
General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
And tear it down they did.
Back in the USSR. You don't know how lucky you are, boy. Back in the US, back in the US, back in the USSR.
In 1991, the leaders of Russia and the surrounding states signed the Belovezh Accords, which officially dissolved the Soviet Union and established the Commonwealth of Independent States. This is referred to as the third wave of democracy, with many countries in Eastern Europe that were under communist control becoming democracies. Once again, the eyes of the world shifted, this time to the Middle East. In 1980, the Soviets invaded Afghanistan, hoping to create a communist-friendly state. All Soviet troops in Afghanistan withdrew shortly before the collapse of the USSR and left many of the surrounding countries in turmoil. The US first got involved when they gave weapons to the Afghanis so they could fight the Soviets. Then America gave weapons to Saddam Hussein during the Iraq-Iran conflict. A few years later, Saddam Hussein would use those weapons in the invasion of Kuwait, and under President George Bush I, American troops invaded Iraq. However, a treaty was signed, and the troops pulled out before they reached Baghdad. Shortly after, the long-standing conflict between Israel and Palestine increased its size, and it seems that no agreement could be reached. Then, President Rabin of Israel and Chairman Yasser Arafat of the Palestine Liberation Organization signed the Oslo Accord, an historic document that allowed a level of peace to spread in the region for several years. Unfortunately, the September 11th terrorist attacks increased tensions and caused America to send troops to Afghanistan to remove the Taliban, a brutal dictatorship. Then President George Bush II decided to invade Iraq, where Saddam Hussein was captured. Saddam, along with several of his top officers, are now on trial for crimes against humanity. In Afghanistan, there are now troops from all over the world, including Canada, who are trying to establish peace. The war in Iraq has now become extremely unpopular with the American public and much of the world, where there is seemingly no end in sight. There are also growing tensions with Iran and North Korea over their nuclear programs, which are threatening to start another war. Democracy is at an interesting place in the world right now. We'll have to wait to see what happens.